On October 15, 2021, the National Indo American Museum opened its doors at the Umang and Paragi Patel Center, the first public space in the United States devoted to the totality of the Indian American experience.
There is a long, long history of Indian Americans in this country that goes back a couple of centuries that people are not aware of. NIAM was founded on the idea that we must capture our history even as we are living it.
The museum's inaugural exhibition, Emerge, Art of the Indian Diaspora, curated by Shaurya Kumar, showcases contemporary and cutting-edge art from 9 renowned Indian American artists working in a wide range of media.
The preconception of being a diaspora is that you have a very strong relationship, almost an urge or a want to move back to your home country. Now, this is being challenged in the recent sociological conversations about the diaspora, but especially from an artist perspective, all the 9 artists are exploring what the expectations are, what their responsibilities are, but then at the same time, they're not being restricted by the preconceived definitions of diaspora also. They are not burdened by the need to represent their Indian Americanness. I think that's very much part of their identities, they are part of their culture. They often bring out narratives and objects from their past, right? And whether it's autobiographical or whether it's political, whether it's simply material and technical as well at the same time, they are very interested in what the diaspora means now in the 21st century. The work that you see is a work by an artist, Avantika Bava, who currently lives in Portland, Oregon. It's a work which is exposed to the outside world, to the cars and the drivers who are driving past by. It's a work which immediately lays down the kind of expectations that one should have walking into this museum, looking at the exhibition. In a lot of ways, it's very inviting and accessible, but at the same time, a simple gesture of painting a dot is very complex as well. A circle or a dot has a great significance in Indian culture, right? So for example, zero was invented in India, or the fact that the dot or the bindi is also very culturally important, symbolizing a woman, a womanhood, a feminism. So Avantika is using multiple layers and multiple filters and making a painted surface which is incredibly simple, like very playful. I thought that this idea of painting dots would be a way for the audience to start thinking about what are the ways in which an artist functions, what are the things that they think about. The work itself is titled ... which also references or reminds us about things yet to come. Behind me is an artist who's based out of Detroit at this point. Her name is Neha Pathak. Neha came from a traditional background of painting and printmaking, but very quickly started to understand the love of materiality itself, right? For example, she's working a lot with very delicate paper, handmade paper, often something like kitikata or other Japanese paper. So she's using those very fragile and delicate materials and visually making them even more porous than what they originally were. So pushing really the structure and the very preconceptions of what a paper is and what a paper should do. She developed this process that she calls plucking, in which she's using a simple thumbtack or a pin and making the paper even more porous by removing the fibers one at a time. It's commenting about the involvement of labor in creating these very delicate surfaces. It has many different ways of echoing into the histories of craft, especially if you think about the fabric and the textile traditions of India. In their colors, they're sort of always very warm, they invite you in. The porosity of the work itself almost reminds me of the dermatological layer of the skin. which in a way directly echoes with the conversations of a preconceived ideas of identity, where often identity is constructed through the lens of a color of a skin. Neha is challenging that very notion of what it should be and what it really is. Right as you enter the main entrance on the left is works by Shrestha Rith Premnath, or Rith, who lives in New York and teaches at Parsons schools. There was a challenge of the space where it was the largest space in the museum, but it's a space which cannot be ever viewed in totality. It's split right in the middle with the column, and Rith very intelligently used that very nature of demarcation, of a split, to create his work. The work is called Lean/Hold. This particular work is an extension of a larger body of work called kettling. Kettling refers to a practice that is often done by police to corral protesters, and he's using the contrasting material of this heavy steel fence with these very delicate materials of foam. The forms look like parts of the body, right? You see the torso and the legs. The foam was plastered on site. So this is one of the works which was made for the exhibition. And the plaster was left to dry as the work was settling into the fence as well. So sort of it made this relationship very symbiotic. It's a very humane way to think about what happens when there are areas of conflict, right? When there is a protester and a protestee, or there is an authority and a protester, sort of what kind of relationship that starts to build. Rith constructed this very sort of long installation, which again, you can't walk through it. So you sort of walk around it because of that this piece of fence sort of that connects the two things together as well. Now, as the plaster was drying, Rith intended for areas of the plaster to crack and chip. And I think the best way to compare that is to what happens to a human body, that the skin wrinkles, it flakes off, it cracks, it bleeds, it burns. You can see the body being scarred through the process of just sort of existing. When the exhibition is going to be deinstalled, this work will be taken apart. It can't be packed back again and reused for another exhibition. It will come to termination. It will end. Here we have works by an artist called Kushla Vora, who comes originally from Panchgani in Maharashtra, which is just a little bit outside of Mumbai. Panchgani used to be a summer resort for the British. The permanent inhabitants of the city are often the poor class or the working class or the labor class who are serving the rich. So that disparity in the society is something that Kushla has always kept central to her work. These ceramic objects are referencing directly the systems of education or knowledge, often working with the symbolism of notepads and then often what happens in margins of a notepad, but now translated from paper to porcelain. Actual pieces of notepads and objects are dipped into a porcelain slip and then fired. And what happens in the kiln is that the physical paper, the binding of the notepad, all burns away, leaving this very hollow residue of a porcelain. But these objects are then placed on this very heavy slab of clay. So the contrast between something which is considered something very light is now becoming quite monumental. In a similar way, in this piece, which is called Bodies Made by Habits, Tools by Hand, these are the objects which are actually made through a process of lost wax method or dhokra. The mold can only make one single object because the mold has to be broken after the object has been cast. These objects are in many cases a direct impression of a human body. So still talking about very much the presence of a body, but again abstracted from a particular identity. This is an installation again done site specific for the museum. It's called Sometimes Forgotten, Sometimes Remembered, The Tribulations and Affiliations Never Erased. It's an installation by an artist, Sarika Gulatia, who lives in Pittsburgh. Originally from Delhi, she moved to the US and then studied at Carnegie Mellon. It's a space which seems very comfortable. It's clearly a bedroom. And when you see the scale of the furniture and the bed, it's a toddler-sized bed. And it's a space that is supposed to be a safe space, a comfortable space. But the way Sarika uses the materiality, it immediately leaves you with a discomfort. The work started first when her father had Lou Gehrig's disease, and Sarika saw her father's body sort of withering away. So the work started with just materializing what a body goes through. She started with this writing desk actually from her father. It's almost like eaten away by termites, but here done a lot more mechanically, almost violently, of drilling into a body. And it grew from that, a rug which has needles sort of penetrating up. The needles are also sort of scattered, and the nails are scattered across the floor as well. This violent gesture of piercing and burning was something that I felt was very relevant to this year, right? This last 18 or 20 months that we have had in the world with COVID. She's always adding a new element. This lamp that is hanging from the ceiling was actually made while she was installing, so she had a process in which she was sort of burning out the paper and then constructing this lamp. It's an installation which is living and breathing. It's a process which happens in a human life. We have new experiences and new ideas and new memories constantly created, but then also things that we forget. This is an installation by an incredible artist who's again based out of New York, who's originally from Varanasi, called Nandita Raman. This work is called Body is a Situation. Nandita took a challenge of the space itself. It's a space which basically splits into two, and it was a space that needed for an audience to interact on a very close scale, which starts with a footprint, right, of the artist, herself, and you start to look up, which immediately comes into conversations with the photograph of Mahamaya, which is slowly being revealed from the ground up. It starts with the reverence of the ground and reverence of the earth to place yourself in this world. The entire exhibit is basically talking about what is the body itself and what is body in relation to everything else that it comes in contact with. So whether it's how bodies have been represented historically, the creation of body in art, the creation of body in religion, the creation of body in a relationship. So it investigates all of that in the most poetic and a beautiful way. In her materiality as well, she's working with prints, she's working with drawings, she's working with photographs, and she's investigating the histories of figures within older photographs and engravings as well, right? So often when you would see an engraving from the French or the British when they were traveling through the Orient, small figures being added to the architecture. Often that would be done to give a scale of a monument, but also the West would use stereotypes. They would make a native Indian, for example, dress up in an exaggerated style to talk about the otherness of the body. So you can see that the text sort of starts to appear and disappear, sort of superimposed on the visual itself. So she's commenting very much upon the preconceptions of, again, what is expected of the body to reveal in terms of histories and identities as well. It feels almost like a salon style kind of an installation, but that forces not just the eye that would be engaged in traditional museum settings, but the whole body itself, that you have to sort of bend down and look down onto the drawing, or you have to go close to a surface to read the label and the description of the work itself. So not only the installation is about the body, but it engages your body in a very direct fashion as well, almost to the point where your body is as acknowledged as the body of the artist herself. Then this is an installation by an artist called Kaveri Raina, who moved from Delhi at the age of about 11. Kaveri also studied at the School of the Art Institute. She studied painting and now is living in New York and teaching at RISD and Parsons and other places. Kaveri immediately gravitated towards using non-traditional methods of painting. Rather than on canvas, she's painting on jute and a surface which is not primed, so it continues to have the same rawness and porosity to the surface itself. She's painting both in back and the front side of the painting. It's an artist having a conversation with the material as the work is being created, which I thought is a beautiful way to think about the ideas of a human being in a society. That there is only certain aspects of the life that you can control. And then there are many things in life that you have to respond and react to. The works are balancing between being figurative and being very, very abstract. It echoes with the craft traditions of paintings from Orissa or from tribal paintings of Jharkhand, for example, or the shadow puppetry that comes out of Andhra and Kerala as well. But at the same time, she is not bound by those traditions. She is not coming with preconceived ideas of what her painting needs to do, but it's a love of every day that is translated within the painting. Kuldeep is a painter, a drawer, and also a performing artist. Kuldeep was trained in classical Odissi in Delhi, and that ideas of capturing the movement and the time and space continues in his practice of painting. As an Indian queer person who's interested a lot in ecofeminism, the work is stemming from an ideas of relation again of a body as a form in a space. They're not always sharp and crisp, the objects and the figures. They are very sort of washed out qualities of the paint, which again shows very much the movement of the figure itself within the painting. It's almost capturing the gesture of the painting, the process of the painting. The paints are very thin and often very fluid. It brings the painting back into action. So in a very interesting way, it echoes with his dance practice, the dynamic of a transient moment and a pause in between that, which is of course the very premise of music as well, and particularly the classical Indian music. And there's also a video work downstairs in the lower gallery as well. In the lower gallery of the museum, there are two projections. The one behind me is by Surbhi Saraf. It's a work called Fold. One thing that COVID did was that it turned the lens into everybody's home. Through all the meetings that would happen virtually through Zoom, people's life became very transparent. You saw kids running around in the background, the cats and the pets were crashing the meetings. And it became a society where there was no boundary between the personal and the professional life. So this work is doing very much that. It's celebrating the silent and the quiet moments that happens in personal lives. It sort of romanticizes the idea of our life being valid in all levels, on all fronts. The work itself, you can see the artist sitting on a couch and doing probably the most hated act in one's household, to fold the laundry and put it aside. These artists are showing internationally. Their work is being placed in collections and exhibitions across the globe. They are carrying them with themselves, a backbone of a rich history and culture that comes out of India. But then at the same time, they're able to articulate that through a lens of transnationalism, of being truly a global citizen. They have the flexibility and they have the creativity, of course, and the passion to really understand the world through the creative lens.